Hey, what's up guys? It's Ben. Today I'm coming at you with another video. This time I'm going to be talking about why Star Trek, the original series, is better than Next Generation. So Star Trek came out in the 60s and then Next Generation came out in the 90s. It was the follow-up and there are parts of it that are better, but ultimately I would say that the original series is better than Next Generation. And actually, I'm going to show a clip here because it's interesting going back to the Big Bang Theory. And part of the reason I think why I wanted to watch The Next Generation after I watched Star Trek was because of this clip. But it's the first time that Sheldon and Leonard meet.
All right. Next question. Kirk or Picard?
Well, that's tricky. Original series over Next Generation, but Picard over Kirk.
Correct. You've passed the first barrier to roommatehood.
I just think it's funny. So here's the thing that you got to break down. So why the original series is better than Next Generation. And of course, this is just my opinion, but here's the deal. I like the characters more in the original series. There's more of them in the Next Generation, particularly more prominent ones. But the thing is that the characters in the original series were more, I would say they had more depth. Now, that's not to say that the Next Generation didn't try, but I would say they had more depth and differences, and they were larger than life characters. So you have kind of the stoic ship's captain. He's kind of stoic, but he's also very charismatic, and he is definitely very good at his job, and he's a rather good tactician for the most part. And then you have his basically computer-like, or trying to be computer-like, counterpart, first officer, science officer, right? And then you have the fun Scottish comic relief, right? But he's also a very good engineer, and he's just kind of a fun guy to be around, but he's good at his job. And then you have the chief medical officer, who, if you accidentally drop a pencil at the wrong time, he thinks the ship's rocking and everything's going to implode. He's dramatic as all get out. But he's also good. He has sometimes good reasons for what he does. And it's just, and he is a good surgeon, good doctor. He's good at his job too. And then you have the Russian character, Chekhov. And I just think he's funny. Particularly, there's a clip from Star Trek Nexus where he says something I thought was really hilarious. And that clip, honestly, from the Star Trek Next Generation Nexus, right? It epitomizes kind of the greatness, even though it didn't have all of the characters, it epitomizes the greatness of the original series because of the fun personality and differences. And Kirk's in the ship, but he's not the captain, and he might as well be like he's about biting his foot off because he can't control the ship. And Scotty's making fun of him a little bit, subtly, but he is. And then Chekhov makes some joke because the ship was underprepared. They didn't have everything done. And it just kind of became a joke in the segment of it's going to arrive next Tuesday, right? The thing that they need, like torpedoes and a medical team. And he's just like, all right, all the crew of another ship that they had transported. He's like, all right, you guys have been promoted to nurses. And I just thought it was funny. I would say Sulu and Uhura, and honestly Chekhov for the most part, throughout the series, they're developed some, but not a lot. They're obviously not the main characters. But they do provide an interesting balance. But for me, it really is, it's Spock, Kirk, McCoy, and then the underneath of Scotty, because he's such a... Montgomery Scott is such a crucial part of the ship because he's an engineer. And not to say that any of the positions aren't crucial, but it's just they have that balance because you have Spock, who's a computer, you have McCoy, who's extremely emotional, and then Kirk, who kind of sits in between. And they just did a really good job with that, and that's something that the Next Generation just doesn't have. And it's one of the reasons why I don't like the Next Generation as well. That's one of the biggest. It just felt like a lot of the characters were very similar. Natasha Yar, William Riker, they're kind of similar. They're all like Worf, except Worf is more interesting because he has a very distinct culture and the different backgrounds and the stuff that they bring. And he is actually emotional, which not to say that these guys aren't emotional, but it's just they feel like these three characters feel very, very similar. Of course, Data's really cool because he actually is a computer. He's an android. And I like Geordi, but there's not as many quite larger than life characters. There's a lot of very military personnel, and I just don't feel like there's as much depth. Now, Natasha Yar, she wasn't in the later seasons, so there's part of that. I'm just not that huge of a fan of Will Riker. He's kind of like Kirk, but he doesn't have that foil that like makes it work because in the original series, Kirk had Spock and McCoy to kind of balance him out. In this one, Picard is the better version of William Riker. But he also doesn't feel the same. I just have a problem with Will Riker because he's very confident, but he's also, and I know they made this part of the series, but it just makes me mad because he's kind of manipulative and he's kind of a man-ho, and he's not the worst thing, but at the same time, I just kind of feel bad for Deanna Troi. And so I guess spoilers, but yeah, they end up getting married. And so it's just the whole storyline to me just it feels very, very convoluted, and there's a lot more moving parts, I guess, and it doesn't mesh as well. But then they kind of part of it is they kind of flipped it over because Worf and Deanna, spoiler, were kind of having a thing towards the end of the series, but in the movies, then Deanna Troi, which kind of makes sense because they've always had a complicated relationship, Deanna Troi and William Riker, and they don't really address it until the way later seasons, but Will kind of stood her up, and that's part of why I don't like her is because he says stuff, but then he turns into exactly it's like, oh, I'm going to come back to you, and then he never does, and that's why she doesn't like him. And also, the movie to me kind of feels preachy. The reason why that Picard is picked as like better than Kirk is because he's a better captain. He's less flawed. Part of what makes Kirk great though is that, and it kind of creates that because sometimes stuff doesn't work out, and like half the women are like dreamy, and they look at him like he's something special, and the other half of the women want to throw something at him, and it felt like they did a better job, except for the third season of the original series. The third season of the original series was not as good, and it felt very recycled. And that's one of the things about as the series went along. And also, another con that I would have to say is that what are the ship's security measures? Sometimes it's like, who's not doing their job? How easy is this thing to take over? And it happens in both series. All right, so actually I'm going to flip back. So another con from there are frequent omniscient beings in both series, and I'm not a huge fan of that. Now that's just a personal preference, but it's just because there's things that are more powerful that you can't really do anything. They have to kind of decide to let you go. Mostly, or sometimes they trick them, but it's just, I don't like the magic kind of feel. I'm not a huge fan of that. But that is more of a personal preference. And they have it in both. So the series, in a lot of ways, is about a Picard. Now, some of the episodes they drift off, and I think they realize that Data is a really strong character, so they keep using him, and he's very interesting, right? Data is a very interesting character, and I like Worf a lot. It's just so so I'm going off the rails here, but the thing I'm going to hit is there is a positive. So the original series was filmed in the 1960s. They probably do have some CGI, but it's definitely not as good. And on top of that, or maybe I don't remember. Anyways, so they have some good set design, but it's limited by the 60s. And then, so you take it to the next generation, and it seems like they have more money, and they have more CGI and practical effects. The aliens are a lot cooler. The set designs are a lot cooler. And that's the one thing that I would say is like the best part about it is that it's a little bit more fun in its environment. But then let's go to really like what it comes down to of why. And I've talked about it some, but it's just, it really is the Picard show, and he's kind of the moral compass. And just frankly, I'm not a huge fan of William Riker as a character. And sure, it's a personal preference, but, and then you have Wesley, and I don't like Wesley. And I know he's a kid, but he just makes some boneheaded decisions. And there's one episode in particular where then he leaves the show, where he causes a kerfuffle because he thinks he's doing something right, but Picard told him explicitly to get out of it, and then he ends up leaving the Starfleet, and part of the reason he was still in the academy was because of a blunder him and his friends made, which mistakes move on from them, of course, but like it's just he's so cocky, but he screws stuff up really bad. Like, and he causes a lot of strife because, okay, so the premise of the episode for the one where he goes away with what he calls a time traveler. And this time traveler really likes him and thinks he's smart. But the thing about it is that Wesley gets involved and helps rile these people back up, and he tells them, because so these people live on a planet, but it was in contested territory. And that's the biggest thing that I think I think they're just choosing to ignore it. But the thing is that these people were in this contested territory between them and the Cardassians, with the Federation of the Cardassians, which the Cardassians are a very militant species, and they often are very villainous in this series, right? So the Cardassians, right, they want this planet, and it's been contested territory. And the people that went to this planet, right, and I think they're supposed to be modeled after kind of a Native American culture. And that's one of the tricks for Picard, is navigating that. Because he's like, I don't want to push these people out again. But they're working to get them off the planet because the Cardassians, in a new treaty, got control of the planet. And they want it. Right? And so these people are ordered to leave, and they knew it was contested when they settled it. But now they're like, we're not leaving. That's the problem that I have with it. You were told it was contested territory. You told that it was contested by an enemy of ours who's very militant and attacks, and Picard's been in a number of battles, so he knows well. They captured him at one point, spoiler, but they captured him at one point. So it's like this is your own fault. You knew that it was contested territory, and you settled anyways. They didn't stop you, but now they're like, you have to get out, right? Because these people are going to kill you. Now, it didn't end up happening, and stuff worked out. But the conflict happened because of people's arrogance, and it wasn't on the fault of the Federation. It was on the fault of the people who settled the planet, when they knew it was contested by a very militant nation. And then Wesley gets involved and screws stuff up, and so they can't beam them off the planet, right? And there's conflict, and then the time traveler just pulls him away, and I just was like, that sucks, and I don't like Wesley anymore. He's anyways, so the series is very sex positive, and not to say that the original series wasn't, but it kind of felt less so in a lot of ways, and that's, I guess, just one of my issues. Is like everything's about, oh, this is the future, people don't need to get married and stuff like that, but then they do, and then they get divorced, and who cares, right? Well, I mean, if you have kids, then it matters. They don't really address that, but anyways, they also hit on a point, and I think that's very positive, but very modern in our cultures, like Geordi, right? Should you have decided to, like, should I be, like, because he's blind, Geordi's blind, and so should he be killed? And there's elements of that, and like, who decides what, right? Do you just decide that he doesn't get to live because he's blind? He's going to be born blind. Anyways, so there's kind of which I like that narrative, but the series definitely, the original series is definitely a lot more preachy in its beliefs, and it feels like it kind of, in Picard in particular, kind of dogs on religion, and they dog on money, and they dog on a lot of what they view as archaic beliefs of the past, which some, of course, are true, but it has a very specific, and it's kind of trying to tell you what to think in a lot of ways. And so that's one of the things I don't like, is I find the Next Generation to be a little snobbish and elitist about its ideas. And that's, I mean, all of that information that I just gave you, right? And truthfully, I'm just not as fan much of the characters. I mean, there's certain ones that I like Geordi's cool. But he has some depth, but I don't feel like it's just not the same as the original series. And like, I like Worf and Data, but then Picard's kind of like the center, and he's supposed to be the moral compass. He's supposed to kind of be the guy that is almost infallible in a lot of ways. Now, that's not to say that isn't. It's just, they're trying to say that they're kind of trying to, like, he's kind of learned from his lessons, and he's become like the example of greatness is kind of how they set it up. And sometimes he is definitely a better moral compass than Kirk, but I don't agree with that statement that he kind of is the be-all, end-all. How they deal with religion and spirituality and all this other stuff, and so I just have a lot harder time with the Next Generation. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Please comment what you thought of this video, comment what you thought of what I was talking about, my opinions, and subscribe. I will see you all later.